Hello and welcome to episode 2 of The Free Fork. Welcome back. And Shabbat Shalom. I mean, I don't know if this is actually ever going to get posted on Friday, but when I wrote the piece that I'm going to be talking about today, it was in fact Shabbat. So Shabbat Shalom. And if Shabbat just passed or Shabbat's coming up, you can just apply it to then instead. If you're not familiar, Shabbat, or the Sabbath, is the weekly time of rest for the Jewish people. And while many Jews worldwide take time to unplug and disconnect from the world, others simply enjoy the family time that Friday nights bring from Shabbat. One of the most popular Friday night meal offerings, but let's be super honest, I will eat this any day of the week, that one could potentially have at a Shabbat table is, of course, chicken schnitzel. And you must be like, Michelle, I thought this was a wellness account. I thought this was a blog about eating and clean and all the things. And you're right. It is those things. But part of what I'm going to be doing is trying out recipes, whether they say the words gluten-free on them or not, or whether they say the words dairy-free on them or not, or whether they're just regular old recipes that I'm substituting with gluten-free or dairy-free products to see how it shakes out. So I like to do that, and then I'm reviewing it, and honestly, I'm just testing recipes so you don't have to. But before we get started into my review of this recipe, which I'll talk about in a moment, a little history lesson for everyone. Because if you know me, or even if you don't know me, what you will learn about me is that I love a good history lesson. And I am a very proud and passionate Jewish person in Toronto. So a little history lesson for you. The Jewish people probably had a sense that schnitzel was delicious, okay? If you aren't familiar, schnitzel comes from Austria. It's an Austrian beloved delicacy. And the Jews probably had a sense or already realized that this was delicious. And they adapted it, as Jewish people have always done over the thousands of years of our existence. We adapt. So we took the traditional Austrian specialty and tweaked it to suit the unique dietary laws within Judaism. So how? How did they do that? First, they changed the meat from veal or pork, which are the traditional meats used in traditional Austrian schnitzel, to chicken. Veal was pretty scarce and hard to find, but most importantly, pork was and is not kosher, and so it couldn't have been done with pork. Another change or an adaptation that was made was that they changed the fat that was used in creating schnitzel. If you're not familiar, it's fried chicken, fried breaded meat rather. The fat that was traditionally used for making schnitzel was butter. And in Jewish kosher law, you can't mix meat and milk, and we couldn't use butter. So instead of using butter, the Jewish people adapted by changing it to a cooking oil in order to avoid mixing meat and milk. In modern times, you see Jewish people also creating a substitution or an adaptation around the holidays. So for Passover, where we're not supposed to have anything with like the wheat and the yeast and like all those pieces, no leavening of any bread of any kind, we use matzah meal instead to bread the meat, or the chicken in this case. And for here, there is no holiday. I mean, there's Shabbat, but you can make it anytime. We're modifying once more to suit the needs of us gluten-free folk. About the recipe. So the recipe that I love for chicken schnitzel and have loved for a number of years is the one by Jake Cohen. I'm an absolute fangirl of Jake Cohen. He has 2 incredible cookbooks. Both are on my shelf. His first one was called Jewish, which is incredible. And honestly, the commentary in the book is just as enticing and exciting as the recipes themselves. And then he came out with another book called I Could Nosh. And they're both New York Times bestsellers. I could not recommend them more. I'll link them in the show notes for you. And if I am not mistaken, I believe there's a third one about to come out. So please keep your eye on Jake Cohen because his recipes are amazing and his books are so wonderful. He really takes traditional Jewish fare and really puts modern twists on them in a really easy to implement way in your own kitchen. Chicken schnitzel fingers recipe, I've been making it for years, and it is a home run every time I make it. The kids love it. The grown-ups love it. It's freezer friendly. And if you are lucky enough that there are leftover, then they hold up really well. But I always recommend making more. And as I mentioned, and I will continue to mention, I love respecting the work of cookbook authors and just everybody in general. I would never put a recipe publicly if it weren't already available publicly elsewhere. I'm not going to like sneak a photo of like a super secret recipe that you can only get in a cookbook. I don't feel right about doing that. But lucky for you, his recipe was featured on Good Morning America. So it's already been made public and it's no issue for me to link it for you. So that will be in the show notes as well. So my initial thoughts, I don't really have too many initial thoughts about it because I have made it several times. So I already know that the recipe is pretty kick-ass. But it was my first time subbing in gluten-free products. So obviously I was like mindful of what products I was going to use. I substituted all-purpose flour, which is what's in the recipe, for Bob's Red Mill all-purpose gluten-free flour. It's not because I have any particular like affiliation with Bob's Red Mill. It's just that that's what was in my pantry. That's like the first one I picked up off the grocery store shelf. So far, I've been pretty pleased with it. And it was only being used for dredging the chicken, and it worked beautifully. But I understand and have heard, and we'll chat later about how when you're baking something and the flour is the main ingredient, it's really important which flour you choose. And I've had recommendations for what flour to use in that instance. But for dredging, this one works totally fine. I also substituted the panko crumbs for the Kikkoman gluten-free panko crumbs. It does call for both panko crumbs and breadcrumbs. I just didn't happen to have any gluten-free breadcrumbs in my house at the time of making the recipe, and the recipe works totally fine without them. So if you prefer to just double up on the amount of gluten-free panko, you can totally do that. But if you want to include breadcrumbs just for that change up of texture, C makes a really great one. And I will link all the things that I'm mentioning. I'm going to link everything in the show notes so that you don't have to like go Google searching for everything. It'll all be there for you, so you don't have to worry about that. If there's one recommendation that I can start by making is plan making more. Like whatever the recipe says in terms of how much chicken to use, buy more, make more, because it's going to fly off the plate. You are going to want to keep eating it, and it freezes really well. So the best case scenario is that you have leftovers and you get to keep enjoying it the day after the dinner or days later. But just trust me, plan for making more. The process can be a little bit laborious. So if you aren't used to dredging chicken in egg yolk and flour, breadcrumbs, whatever, that whole thing, if you're not used to that, it could seem a little, the Yiddish word is like a pachka. It's a bit of a headache, like a, big messy mess. Once you have it all set up, and I do mine in bowls in the order of which it's being dredged, then it's pretty easy once you have it all set up. So I set up my flour bowl, my beaten egg bowl, my spiced, panko or situation bowl there. And then I have a sheet pan laid out with parchment paper. And then on the other side of my stovetop, I have another sheet pan with paper towel lining it. So it's kind of like an assembly line. I put one fork in each bowl and I transfer the chicken from one bowl to another. And then I use the other fork to take it off because if you know anything about me, I cannot stand handling raw chicken with my bare hands or any raw meat in general. And this gets the job done very well while also getting to keep my hands clean. But as I discovered yesterday when I was making a totally different and unrelated recipe to be reviewed in a later episode, I decided I just need to buy some like disposable rubber gloves for the kitchen because sometimes it's just easier to use your hands. But in this case, a fork totally does the trick. And the final tip, the trick of all tricks, and this is me passing down some Jewish wisdom that was passed down to me. Put a piece or two of raw carrot in your oil when you're frying it. It prevents the oil from burning. There's something in the property of the carrot that just kind of neutralizes everything. It keeps things neutral. So it's like my number one recommendation to do that. The results, the final product, and final thoughts. This was an absolutely epic meal. It was epic. It's always epic, and it will always be epic. It's a 10 out of 10. Honestly, it's like a 15 out of 10. I highly recommend it. Substitutions for gluten-free work seamlessly. Use a great nonstick pan or cast iron pan. I use Heritage The Rock pans. I find them to be the most effective nonstick, similar to a cast iron without being a cast iron pan. You can get them at like Canadian Tire, but again, I'll link everything for you. Remarkable. And dip it in whatever your favorite honey mustard might be for extra yumminess. There's just something about honey mustard that brings out this amazing flavor quality of the chicken, and the two of them marry beautifully. This is a short one today because this was just a recipe review. So if you have any recipes that you want me to try, please let me know. Shabbat Shalom, my people. Wishing you a week full of peace and strength and, space and time for yourself. Thank you for being here with love.